So the theme, I guess, of International Women's Talmud Day this week is Masekhet Shabbat, this year rather. And I thought it would be interesting. What I wanted to teach is not actually about Masekhet Shabbat, but it's, or rather, it is about Masekhet Shabbat, but it's not about Shabbat, at least not directly at all. Maybe at the very end we'll have a chance to bring it back to the theme of like Shabbat as the day of rest. But for now, I just wanted to sort of examine this interesting long piece of Aggadot, meaning of sort of homiletical, non-legal text in the 80s in Masekhet Shabbat. So I'll share it with you in a minute. And I just want to go through certain pieces of it are somewhat well known and get sort of a lot of play. I wanted to try and read a bunch of this Aggadot together and see if there are any themes that can come out, that maybe the themes are a little different than when you just read piece by piece. But we'll start with a pretty famous piece of it. So I am going to share my screen, and then I'll share with you. I'm going to share my screen. So here we are. Here is beginning and Shabbat 88a. This comes after a long discussion of exactly what date and what day of the week was Matan Torah, trying to sort of make everything fit in terms of the chronology of the Torah and various other midrashim. And now the Gemara is kind of like, oh, well, by the way, let's talk about the substance of Matan Torah. So it starts with this pasuk. In the Hebrew, I've tried to italicize every time that it's a pasuk. I might have missed a few, so apologies. Let's just start this first story. I broke them up somewhat according to the Sephardi translations, meaning their paragraphs, somewhat according to what made sense to me. It's not like, you know, if you'll pardon the expression, it's not Torah Sinai the way that I made these paragraphs, but it's for ease of reference. Okay. Right? This is part of the Matan Torah story in Exodus 19, right? Anochi Hashem is Exodus 20. So here they're getting ready to accept the Torah, and they stand around at the bottom of the mountain, because remember, they're not allowed to go up on the mountain. So this is in its original context, it's kind of like innocuous thing to say, right? They stand at the bottom of the mountain. Great. Amar Rav Dimi bar Chana bar Chasa. So we have this statement attributed to Rav Dimi bar Chana bar Chasa. Great. Milamed, what does this verse actually teach us? Shekafa kadosh baruch hu alehem et ahar kigigit. God overturned or sort of held over the mountain over them like a barrel. But Amar lahem, and he said to them, Im atem mekablin haTorah mutav. If you accept the Torah, that's great. V'im lav sham teikvarchem. And if not, there will be your burial. Meaning, I'm making you an offer you cannot refuse, quite literally, right? Like, here's this mountain, I will drop it on your head, or you can accept the Torah and we can both go on our merry way, right? Okay, so this is a little bit of I want to sit with this image for a minute. Pretty gruesome, right? It's pretty threatening, a little bit scary. That, okay, right, Torah is great, but just, you know, don't think that you have a choice in this matter, right? And this idea, I think there's several things that come out, but one of the ideas here of the sort of force that's necessary to make Matan Torah happen is kind of scary, and I think this Gemara is going to work out that part of it, but it's also, I think, interesting in the context of some of the stories that are going to come later in terms of the extent to which God is willing to go to make the giving of the Torah work. And every time we see something, the question is, could it have worked without this sort of extraordinary measure? So right now we're thinking, could it have worked without this extraordinary measure of forcing the Jews, right? Reading the Psukim, there's no indication that they're literally, there's no indication that this gun held to their head, right? Maybe there's another version of the story in which they're all like, yeah, this seems great. So it's interesting to say it this way, but okay. Here we have this sort of very threatening image. Amar Rav Bar Yaakov says, Mikan Moda Rabalo, right? This is a substantial caveat. That's how they translate it. That was the title of the shir, right? Moda is sort of an objection, right? This is a great legal objection to the Torah, right? You just said we were forced. What are some of the ways to challenge a contract in court? In both Jewish law and secular law, and probably most kinds of law, duress is a good way to challenge a contract, right? I didn't really want to sign it. Somebody held a gun to my head is usually a good way to get out of a contract, okay? Right? So if they are coerced into accepting it, they should have, meaning we, the rabbis in the Gemara, we shouldn't have to keep the mitzvot if we were forced into this whole thing. So Rabbah says, right? Even so, it's true. Maybe that was once the case. Hador kibluha b'mei Achashverosh, but then they went back and accepted it in the time of Achashverosh. Tichtiv kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, right? As it says, here's my first example of a pasuk that I have not italicized, right? So kimu v'kiblu haYehudim, right? When the pasuk in Esther chapter 9, which is all about the establishment of the holiday of Purim, and in the Pshat, right? They sort of have the thing, which is the date, depends on where you live, all this stuff, right? What are the features of this holiday, right? The Jews ordained, right, and took upon themselves, right? It's sort of flowery language, but the Midrash here says, Kimu ma shekiblu kfar, right? They establish now what they had already sort of accepted under duress previously, okay? So in terms of like our obligations in the Torah, we solved that problem because, right, we did accept it voluntarily, just not at Matan Torah. It's kind of strange, right? So it seems like Rava says, yeah, you're right. Like everybody up until the time of Esther and like Mordechai has a good claim that they should not actually have to follow the Torah, which is somewhat strange. There are many strange things about that, right? One is that nothing in the rest of the Bible indicates that the Jews are not accountable for their covenant with God during that time. In fact, like they seem to get punished for not keeping it many times, okay? The first time they get punished for not keeping it happens almost immediately, right? The golden calf, which we will meet very soon in this Aggadot. But in general, right, the idea that you can sort of just like shrug and be like, yeah, well, maybe it wasn't binding for the first however many hundred years, but now it is, oh well, is odd. People try and read it in different ways. Maybe, okay, there are attempts to try and read that, but it's an issue in this text, right? The second thing is, right, is this really like, what's going on when we say, oh, they accepted in the time of Achashverosh, right? It's great that you found this pasuk, right? Kimu v'kiblu sounds like, for example, our catchphrase is Matan Torah, not 70 Shema, right? We shall do and we shall listen, right? Kimu v'kiblu, maybe it's like similar things that are kind of backwards in order, right? Usually you accept something and then you do it, not the opposite way. Now, in the Pshat, in Esther, what it means is they kimu, they sort of did it the first year, and then they accepted it as a holiday that they do after that. That's probably the simple meaning, right? But, you know, if you just take those two words, it does make sense. Usually you fulfill something after you accept it, right? So we have the same kind of idea of a double verb, both the, nasa v'nishma, kimu v'kiblu is sort of like this alliterative thing, na, ka, right? They sound the same, they seem like they might be in the wrong order, so it's cool that like one is kind of the mirror to the other. That's great, but it seems like that can't be the only reason that we've gone to the town of Achashverosh, right? And here, right, there is a Tosfot that I have at the bottom of this page, not the bottom, but like, at the bottom of this document. I found myself becoming extremely free with the length of source sheets now that I'm not printing them out on paper. So you can ignore or not ignore the things that appear at the end that we're not flipping to. So there's the Tosfot sort of famously says here, well, they frame it in a different way, which is, well, okay, so like, what about all the other times that we have Moshe and then Yehoshua sort of making a covenant, and Bnei Israel seem to be accepting the Torah voluntarily? And he says, well, in all those situations, God told them to. So it's basically like it's against their will, which I think is a really interesting window into this midrash, right? But, which is, the midrash is like this like supernatural, terrific in the sense of like terror-inducing, terrorizing kind of image. The mountain is hanging over your head. But what's that dramatizing? It's dramatizing a reality where like, do Bnei Israel really have a choice to walk away from the mountain? No. Right? Like, what happens if they walk away? Then they're just stuck in the desert. So, their reality is one where they don't have a real choice. And the time of Achashverosh is a time when they do maybe have a real choice, right? I believe I prefer this from my teacher, Rabbi Clapper, this sort of reading of this Gemara. But right, the first time that they have a real choice is, or a time they have that choice is in the time of Achashverosh. Achashverosh would be very happy, perhaps, at least initially, for the Jews to just become Persians like everyone else, right? Come to my party, drink my wine, be Persians, right? They have a choice to do that, and they choose not to. And the way Tosfot describes that choice is me'ahavat hanes, out of the love of the miracle, right? There's definitely something going on there with fear versus love, right? That it's sort of being able to do something willingly is in some ways the highest religious calling and is not always available. It wasn't available in the initial stages of this covenant in some ways. And so I think, right, one interesting thing to think about is, okay, so we've kind of like redeemed this scary thing of like, oh, we were forced. It's like, no, we weren't really forced, but like we weren't able to achieve the highest level of voluntariness so long as we didn't really have options. Once we had options, you know, we were able to achieve this higher level of voluntaritude, I don't know, and great. It's kind of like a nice redemptive thing. I would go back to the beginning of the story, which is, okay, so why give the Torah then in that way? Right? There's something still a little strange about sort of choosing to give the Torah in a way that it can't be fully accepted. Okay? Let's put that in the background, right? First of all, yeah, I want to take a few things from this text that I think will come up in the later text, right? One, this moment of Matan Torah is precarious or dangerous or life-threatening. You don't know how it's going to go until they do, or maybe you do, but there seems to be this sort of possibility that everything is going to unravel right now, right? Second of all, that there's something urgent about it that means it has to be done even if it's being done in a non-ideal way. And I think as we keep reading, let's think about what some of that urgency entails. Okay, so now in part B. Okay, Amar Chizkiah, my dichtiv. So the structure of much of this Gemara is cite midrashim, meaning rabbinic reading of text that cite a pasuk and then apply it to Matan Torah. So here, right, the first one, it doesn't even say the name of the speaker before it says the pasuk, and then here's what Rav Avdimi Bar Chama Bar Chasa said about that pasuk. Here we have Chizkiah said, what is the meaning of the pasuk? Mishamayim hishmat adin. All right, you caused the sentence to be heard from heaven, and the earth feared and was silent, right? So again, right, these poetic sections of Tanakh, like Tehillim, have a lot, or Nevi'im, Achronim, they have a lot of parallel language, right, where you have two verbs that seem to mean the same thing, two nouns that seem to mean the same thing in the pasuk. One way of looking at it is like, okay, that's just biblical poetry, but the rabbinic way of looking at it is like, each of those words must mean something different. Okay, so im yara lama shakta, right? If it was afraid, why was it quiet? Im shakta lama yara. And here it's even more than those words must mean something different, but shakta usually means like, batishko ta'aras and sefer shofrim, right, was calm, right? If you're afraid, you're not calm. If you're calm, you're not afraid. So which one is it? Rather, b'tchila yara v'sel shakta. First, they were afraid, but then they calmed down. And who is the they, right? Eretz. The earth was afraid, but then it was sort of put at ease. Okay, why was the earth afraid? K'derei Lakish. According, the earth was afraid because of this thing that Rish Lakish had said. And Rish Lakish said, "My dichtiv, vayhi erev vayboker yom hashishi," was evening and morning, the sixth day, meaning yom sheni, yom shlishi, but yom hashishi. Okay, hey yitera lamali. Why do we have this extra hey, the sixth day? Right? This teaches that God hitna, made a snai, made a condition with the sort of creation. And said to them, right? If Israel accepts the Torah, you will continue to exist. But if not, then I will return you to chaos. Right? So the same sort of offer that's made to Israel, right, like either die now or accept the Torah, actually there's like a parallel, not offer, but contingency hanging over the whole world, which is if Israel says yes now, everyone's great. If Israel says no now, then that's the end. And how does this come from the word hey? Sorry, from the letter hey, right? Hashishi. It seems like they're reading it as hey hashe'ela, yom hashishi, in Terabang, right? You love in Terabangs as much as I do. I hope you're smiling. So, right, Yom HaShishi, question mark, right? Who knows? Is this the end or not? Okay. So here we have, right, we've sort of widened the camera lens. We start with Bnei Israel, sort of don't really have a choice. And we can soften it and say they don't have the full choice, they don't have full autonomy. Maybe they're not capable of full autonomy at that point in their history to begin with, right? And they have to go through this historical process to get there. Maybe, okay, but sort of they don't have a full choice. And now it turns out that even though they don't have a full choice, actually the existence of the entire world depends on what they do now, right? And it seems like God is kind of tipping the scale. God does not want to go back and turn the world into chaos. So God's like, hey guys, you must accept the Torah now, right? This is part of the plan, and if you don't do it, everything is going to get destroyed. So do it now. Thank you, right? So that's kind of, again, right, there's this idea that this moment, there's something very important about this moment, but it's not something that we can necessarily, that makes it necessarily happen in the ideal way, right? It's a very, very high stake, but also in some ways deficient because of that, right? Like it must happen now, and as a result, it must happen even if you're forced to do it. Okay. I'm going to go on for a little bit. So let's keep that, right? We're sort of opening this whole section of Aggadot about Matan Torah with this sort of dark-ish moment where God basically holds a gun or a mountain to, if you die, right, if you don't accept the Torah, you, and by the way, the entire world will end right now. Okay? But, you know, later on they accepted and that's okay. So we start, I guess, with like an interesting big frame of history from Matan Torah all the way through like the first Jewish Commonwealth, basically. An interesting question is sort of, not question, but an interesting thing to think about is what points in history are we touching on? So the first one's taking this very broad view, and in fact, it's going all the way back to creation. This one is taking, you don't have to go that far to see some problems with this Matan Torah plan, okay? So Rabbi Simai taught, right? The time that Israel said Na'aseh before Nishma, right? We all learn this in, no, I should never say we all learn this. Very popular thing to learn at all ages, right? Na'aseh v'nishma, it appears in like the road, right? We say Na'aseh v'nishma, we shall do and we shall listen. Like I was saying before, it's probably lurking in our section A, right? Do before listen is sort of praised as like, oh, that's so amazing, what a great commitment. They're willing to do it even if they don't know what exactly it's going to entail, right? So when Israel proceeded Na'aseh to Nishma, we shall do, before we even hear what's in it, right? 600,000, which is sort of like the canonical number of Jews at Mount Sinai, though, you know, one could ask questions about that, right? Right, one angel for each of them, Yisrael. Kashrulo shnei ktarim. They gave him 2 crowns. Echad keneged Na'aseh, echad keneged Nishma. Right, one for each of these amazing things that they have said. They each get a little crown, right? The idea of the kosher ketarim is going to come up later in this Aggadot as well, in a different context, right? So you get, basically you get like 2 special crowns for saying Na'aseh v'nishma, for accepting the Torah seemingly willingly, meaning our whole parts A and B, especially part A about how the Jews had to be forced and they didn't really want to, is like out the window now, and we're accepting the Torah with love, and God is so happy he gives us these rewards, okay? Israel, right? But very soon later, when Bnei Israel sin, right? Twice as many right? Destructive angels come down, not one per person, but one per crown, and remove them. It says in the verse, right? The children of Israel were sort of had their stuff removed that they had received at Har Chorei, was the best way to sort of they're translating it. So basically, and I'm going to skip this next little part that's in brackets, right? Sort of, you get the crowns, you lose them. It's kind of like it's over in a moment almost, right? It's like, I see it as almost the flip side of the first thing, where this moment is so important that you have to force Bnei Israel to do it, right? Now, this moment is so important that even though it's going to be undone in a few weeks, it's still like there's something very important about that sort of isn't really taken away. And you get that a little bit from the fact that the undoing has to be, it's harder than the doing in some way, right? You can have one angel bring 2 crowns at first, but you can't take them both away at the same time. And finally, right? But Moshe, they didn't go away completely. All the crowns that had belonged to all of Israel sort of go to Moshe, and that's why Moshe has this incident where he has to leave the camp and his face is shining, right? That these sort of crowns are sort of a metaphysical thing, and they make his face shine. And in the future, Israel will get them back, and we have another pasuk to prove that. Doesn't actually right? They're sort of going to get the joy that they had once had will return to their head, okay, literally on their head. Okay, so here we have sort of a different kind of historical progression, right? In the first source, we have a historical progression where it starts off being either coerced or at a lower level of acceptance, and we move towards something better. Here we start off at the something better, right? We get worse, and we have this promised future where it will get better again. So here, right, we sort of have these two views of history, right? Like, are we sort of getting worse or getting better over time? Sorry about the link issue. Okay, let's hold them both in abeyance for a moment. We're going to sort of take our view even bigger. What we've gone back to the creation of the world. Now we're going to like exit this world and look at sort of like the upstairs realms of what's going on while the Matan Torah is happening. So Amar Rabbi Elazar said, right? At the time that Israel said Naaseh before Nishma, Yaseh Batkol, right? Right, a heavenly voice, a heavenly echo type voice, Batkol literally means an echo, right? Came out and said to them, right? Who told you this secret? And now he's going to use a verse to prove that angels also use the word Naaseh before Nishma. That's the point of this verse quotation. We don't need to get too into it for now, right? But basically, B'nai Israel, like, who gave you this idea? This, in fact, is like one of the secrets of the angels, right? That you're not supposed to know, or I wouldn't expect you to know, okay? Then we have this Rasha and Tapuach Basei Ya'ar, that the apple trees, sort of their fruit comes before their leaves. And all the Farshim are like, wait a minute, that's not true of the apples that we know. So fine, maybe a tapuach is a generic fruit, it's not an apple tree. Who knows what this news is really about? But basically, right, there's something important about the order of Naaseh and Nishma, as we kind of know, right? Previously, in passage C, right, we know that that's a really important thing that gets you 2 crowns. Here it's sort of making explicit, it's because of the order, right? And that order is somehow sort of like an angelic thing to do. But we don't know exactly. Okay, let's keep going about a little more about which one is it? About Naaseh and Nishma. Let's see if I can. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. Ahomina. There was once, we're in passage E, a heretic. Dechazie, or some kind of sectarian, right? Dechazie l'Rava, he saw Rava, who was me'ayin bishmata, he was immersed in studying halacha. In my mind, the picture is always somebody hunched over a book, but he was not hunched over a book. It was just happening in his head, right? They didn't have these things written down. And v'yatva esba'ata didei tutekara, right? And his fingers were under his legs. He was sitting on his hands. The kamai right? And he was sort of squishing them, right? The kamazan esba'ate dama, and his fingers were bleeding. Here it's squirting of blood, but meaning like he's causing himself physical distress or sort of harm because he's so engrossed in Torah, or maybe even in order to help himself concentrate. I don't know. So the heretic says to him, I'm a paziza. You guys are a ridiculous nation. You're impulsive, right? Right? Your eyes are bigger than your stomach is the way we would say, right? Your mouth preceded your ears, meaning you said Naaseh before Nishma, right? It's like we would say your eyes are bigger than your stomach, maybe it's a similar expression of like you, right? Like you should not have accepted this until you knew what it entailed. Would you have accepted the Torah if you knew that it was going to make you sitting on your fingers, like talking to yourself in a random place? Maybe not, right? Until you bleed. Right? You should have first heard, you should have said Nishma, and then either we'll say what we're not to. Amarle, so Rava said back to him, Ana de Saginan Bishlemuta, Ktivan Tumati Sharim Tama, right? We who sort of proceed wholeheartedly, we don't proceed tentatively or with caveat. We were all in from the get-go, and about us is written the pasuk, the integrity of the upright will guide them. Hanash inchi, the Sagan Ba'alizuta, but people who are always trying to kind of like find ways out, but plot and sort of like have plots and plans, right? Kitiv Bahu, Vasela Fuklim Yishadi, right? About those people, it's written that the perverseness of the faithlessness, the second half of the same verse, will destroy them, right? If you want to be all in on the Torah, right, tumat, like tumimut, wholeheartedness, simplicity, naivete, but usually in a good way, right? The simplicity of the people who walk straight will take them along the path, right? So Rafa has this very moving thing of like, no, I regret nothing. I'm actually happy that we Jews have accepted the Torah without condition, because that allows us to walk with God and brings us sort of on the right path. And it's not possible to walk that path if you are thinking too much about it in advance. Sounds like. Okay. Okay. How does that inform what we learned at the very beginning, right? That they may not have been as wholehearted, or rather that God felt the need to force them, right? God didn't trust them that they would be okay, right? They were just like, right? God wasn't like, oh, they said not to Nishma, great. I don't have to worry about this anymore. How does this fact that we're so praising this idea of wholehearted, sort of naive acceptance fit with the idea that God felt the need to force B'nai Israel? Now, maybe it doesn't fit. Maybe these are just two ideas. But I want to see if maybe they have something in common. Think about that. Right. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. I'm in section F. My dichtiv livavtini echoti chala. Right. I'm going to actually sort of skip over this a little bit. Right. Basically, kind of referring to the relationship of God and the Israelites as a marriage, and sort of, but bringing in the fact that it's true, right? They accepted, but they accepted with one eye, and already 40 days later, they were already looking elsewhere. So like, in all of these things, you talk about this wholehearted acceptance, and always in the background, in the next breath is like, oh, b'chit ha'egel, right? The same as the crown. The crown came, crown's left, right? It's always sort of hovering over the situation. Okay, so I'm going to go on to section G. I'm going to actually skip section G as well. Very interesting, but not for us. No, I'm not going to skip section G. Okay. So we start with the statement of Rabbi Yochanan, who says, "My dechtiv Hashem yitain, Amar Avram Tzava," right? Hashem yitain Omer, sorry, Tzava, right? The Lord gives the word, the woman that proclaimed the tidings are a great host. Everything that God said at Har Sinai was actually sort of like, could be said in 70 languages. 70 is all the languages, right? That's what that means. That, like every language, right? Meaning, there's a lot to say here about the theology of revelation, that like, what does it mean to try and encapsulate God's word into like words that we speak? Is there something mystical about the Hebrew language, or is there something that's multifaceted that isn't really captured by any one language, but is captured maybe by all of them, or maybe not, right? And then, right, so we're sort of introducing the idea of sort of multiplicity, which is going to lead us to this theme. Hani debei Rabbi Shmuel, a break up from the school of Rabbi Shmuel, like, right, God says, my word is not like a fire, right? Is my word like a fire? My word is like a fire, sorry, right? Like a hammer that shatters the rock. Right? That the hammer, the shot to be the hammer shatters the rock, right? Ma patish zen nechlas b'chama nitosot, right? Doesn't, just as the sort of the hammer breaks, they put in a stone into several fragments. Like some of the Farshim go a little crazy. What do you mean? Which thing is getting broken, the hammer or the rock? There's sort of a transitive verb problem here, but for our purposes, it actually doesn't really matter, right? The hammer sort of generates, in whichever way, multiple sort of sparks, right? Or shards. So too, right? Everything that came out of God's mouth kind of got separated, splintered, if you will, into 70 languages. And there's obviously lurking behind here, not just like languages like French, Spanish, Arabic, but languages sort of like ways of understanding or approaching. Okay. Amar Rav Hanan bar Papa. My dichtiv, right? What? Rav Hanan bar Papa said, what is the meaning of the verse? Shim'u ki nigidim adaber, right? Listen, for I will speak royal things. Okay? Lama nimshu divrei Torah kinagid. What does the words of Torah have to do with being a ruler? Lamar nacha. Ma nagid zeh yesh bo lahamit ulahachayot, right? The ruler can kill you or keep you alive, right? Af divrei Torah yesh behen lahamit ulahachayot. Right? Divrei Torah can go in two directions. You can live through them or you can die through them. Here, this is like what Rava says, for people who go on the right, nice double entendre for us English speakers, right? The right/correct path. It's like a potion of a life-giving potion, but for people who go on the left, meaning the bad path, it's a death potion. This is not like a right-left in our post-French Parliament way of thinking about right and left. It just means good and bad. Sorry to any lefties here, but okay. Fine. So Devar Acher, right? So we have this whole multiplicity thing has brought us to the suggestion that the words of Torah can take you in can go in one of two very different opposite directions, good or bad, right? Like portion of life, portion of death. Okay. Here's another possible interpretation of the same verse, Nigidim, right? First we said Nigidim is sort of like, an absolute despot type dictator, ruler person who can either kill you or keep you alive as it wishes, right? Here's another possible reason. Why would you relate the words of Torah to things that are royal, right? Kol dibur b'dibur sheyatzah mipi Aggadot baruch koshrim lo shnei ktarim, right? Every utterance that emerges from the mouth of the Holy One, blessed be He, has two crowns tied to it, right? And remember I said, right, koshrim lo shnei ktarim is going to come back. It's going to come back again. This is the first time it comes back. First, it was Bnei Israel who get two crowns, right? Because they say Na'aseh v'nishma. Here, it is the words themselves that have crowns associated with them. Maharsha, who's a well-known commentator on Aggadot from, I want to say, 16th century Krakow, says, because every word of Torah has sort of two aspects. It has the nigla and the nistar, if I'm not mistaken who said that, right? It has sort of the hidden and the revealed portions of the Torah, right? Everything that you're learning has something that's sort of accessible and then some sort of mystical secrets behind it. But in any case, right, there's something about the Torah itself contains the capacity to have these two crowns. If we connect ourselves all the way back to our earlier statement, I guess in part C probably, right? There's the Jews themselves kind of are communing with that for a time, right? They're able to access being like the words of Torah almost, right? But always in the background is the other interpretation of this same verse, right? In some ways, the two ways of interpreting this verse can take us back through our whole sugya and see the two sort of motifs or themes regarding Matan Torah, right? One, Nagid, right? Words of Torah are royal because they have the power of life or death. All the sort of scary, like the world is going to get destroyed unless you accept this now. At the same time, right, they have this double sort of extra power of Na'aseh v'nishma that they grant access to something that's really above what humans are supposed to access. They grant access to these sort of like angelic secrets. And I think it's very interesting and probably not by accident that this one pasuk can be interpreted in both of those ways, each of which recalls a different passage that has already come before, right? That at the one hand, right, Matan Torah is very momentous task. I was about to say momentous moment, but it's this super momentous experience, which on the one hand is extremely high stakes and scary and risky and of uncertain outcome, and then the other hand has sort of like, it has a very high downside, you could say. It also has a very high upside, right? You can have access to this angelic realm almost through the Torah that otherwise you can't. Okay, I'm going to move on a little, right? Here again, right, as soon as we talk about these sort of like up high moments of like, connection, we have to bring back the Chet HaEgel again. That's part H, right?
Charles?
Okay. Let's go on to I'm going to skip over to part J. We're now entered into a series of statements about Matan Torah by Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. they're sort of like a mini section within this longer Aggadot. And here, let's go to section J, right? Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, Kol dibur v'dibur sheyatzani pi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Everything that God, every sort of utterance that came out of God's mouth, as it were, at Matan Torah, yatzani shmatan shel Yisrael, yatzani shmatan, right? Their soul departed. Shneimar nafshi yatsa b'davro, a verse from Shir Shir, right? My soul departed when he spoke, meaning that just hearing the Torah kills you, right? And then we're like, wait a minute. So how many, there's like a Sarah had Dibros, so how could you die 10 times, right? Usually when you're dead, you're just dead, right? Right? God revives them, right? And then they could die again. So, right, and it's like rain, okay. So, right, there's something sort of high stakes doesn't even account for it, I think. We've seen now as much as we need to see for a Tosfot that I think I mentioned before, which is, right, what is it? I don't know if I mentioned before, actually, right? Tosfot says, right, Tosfot's trying to harmonize. Tosfot is sort of known as like the harmonizers, right? They like to make everything make sense together. They're particularly known for doing that between different Gemaras, right? Wait, there's a Gemara in Nedarim that says this. How does that work with this Gemara here? But they're also known for doing that, right? Like, or here they're doing that even within our Gemara, right? They're doing that within our two sort of threads of this Gemara, one of which is like, hey, Bnei Israel really accepted the Torah and that was awesome, like wholeheartedly. Another one is like, God had to force them or they wouldn't have done it, right? So Tosfot says, wait a minute, on our sort of section A, our or text in this section of, what do you mean God had to force them? Tosfot says, wait a minute, like, why couldn't God just rely on them having said, not seven Ishma? He says, oh, well, maybe like, you couldn't rely on that because it's true. They did accept it wholeheartedly, but once they experienced just how dangerous and threatening it was, and he cites this sort of passage that comes later, meaning like when they experience themselves dying for it, they might have second thought, right? Which I think is very sort of, it captures something about this sugya, which is everything we say about Nasev and Ishma is so lofty, but at the same time, there does seem to be this underside, right? Which is like, you could die if you don't do it, right? And whether you think that that's literally God holding them out, or not literally, whatever, meaning that's just like an explicit threat about Matan Torah, or just the nature of the covenant is that it's not all sun and roses and buttercups and sunshine, right? That there's a threat of punishment or distance or bad things that can also happen, right? This passage is going to end with a reference to some bad things that can happen to the Jewish people that seem to be inherently part of the covenant. Not this not passage J, but the whole sugya. So Tosfot is sort of saying, like, it's true, right? You can wholeheartedly accept something and still back out at the last second, right? And right, what God is trying to do is prevent that backing out. Okay. Here's another, section K is like another statement of like how awesome and scary it is that God's word is happening here. And now we're going to pick up with section L. So now we're going to sort of, like, remember I said before, we sort of panned up and God says, hey, Jews, you learn the secrets of the Masekhet Shabbat. Here we're sort of, I never thought of this before until I was preparing for this talk. Right, the first passage about accepting the Torah is frequently taught as sort of a standalone thing. This passage is also somewhat taught, right, like as a standalone thing, but it's interesting how they're in conversation with each other, right? So God has to kind of threaten and cajole the Jewish people into accepting this very risky proposition. Here, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, right, right? Moshe goes up to get the Torah, right? Not just up the mountain, sort of like up to the heavenly realm. And the angels are like, what is this, like woman-born person doing here, right? He doesn't belong. There's two realms, and there's a separation, and why didn't you bring somebody from the lower realm into the upper realm, right? So, God says that to them, L'kabel Torah, he's here to accept the Torah. So, this does not make them feel better. This makes them feel worse. Right? You've had this thing hidden away, this hidden treasure for 974 generations before the creation of the world, and you want to give it to flesh and blood, right? 974 makes it, if you sort of take the generations literally, I believe that adds up to 1,000 from the time that the Torah is created to the time that the Torah is given. It's like a nice round number, Okay, maybe that's what it means to say like this old sort of spot. So you have this sitting around here for so long, and now you just want to give it to flesh and blood, right? Implication like flesh and blood is bad. They don't deserve it. What are you doing, right? Right? Like what is this? Is a pasuk that's cited in other times. What is man that you're mindful of him, and the son of man that you think of him? Hashem Adonenu, right? God our Lord, right? This is sort of their alternative. Right? Your glorious name is in all the earth because your majesty, your hod, is placed in heaven. By the way, right, when we heard about the crowns, I think it's Rashi who says they were shel hod, right? They were made of sort of glory, they were comprised glory in some way, right? So the angels are like, no, this should stay here. Amar lo kadosh baruch hu Moshe. So, right, Moshe sort of shows up, and God's like having this argument with the angels, and they say human beings do not deserve this, special treasure. And God says to Moshe, hey, why don't you respond to them? Right? Give them a response. Amar lefanav, so he said to him, Ribono shel olam mityareani shema yisrufuni behevel shebefihem. Actually, like, that's easier said than done. I'm a little afraid of talking to angels because it seems like they don't like me very much, right? And I don't know what's going to happen to me if I talk back to them. Maybe they're going to burn me with their breath. So God says, Achod b'chisei kavodi, right? Hang on to my throne. Chazor lahen shuvah. Then you can respond to them. Right? A pasuk from Eov, notoriously difficult. We came to understand, right? And Rabbi Nachman, this seems to be a statement of Rabbi Nachman that's traveling with this pasuk, right? We're setting the pasuk, and then we're setting Rabbi Nachman's interpretation, which is that God sort of sort of like enclosed Moshe in his Shechina or his cloud. Okay, so Moshe is sort of like encompassed in the cloud, and he's protected from the potential fiery breath of the angels, and now he can answer them. This is obviously, there's a lot of potential here for symbolic possibilities, right? What is this? Is it really like Moshe seeing angels and they have their dragons and they have fire breath? Like, I don't know about that, right? There's something symbolic going on of, right? It seems almost like Moshe's sort of taken their argument to heart. This is how Maharsha reads it. Moshe's taken their argument to heart, right? They said, like, the Torah is not appropriate for a human being who's sort of, susceptible to sin, mortal, bound up in the physical world in whatever way. And Moshe's like, you're right. Who am I to say that I can access whatever divine secrets the Torah has, just be like as a human being? Maybe it's impossible. Right? Maybe the angels are right. There's parts of the Torah that I will never understand as a human being. Right? Maybe they're right. Okay? So when God says, hold on to my chair, according to the Maharsha, right, he's saying, don't think that way. Right? Actually, right, yeah, maybe that's true, like in terms of the way the angels and humans are created sort of in their static state, but I'm offering you something which is the ability to transcend that. I'm offering you the ability to sort of like come into my protected circle and access things that you shouldn't logically be able to access, right? And that this isn't actually sort of like a substantive argument. It's not like these people are scary, but it's sort of like, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong here, right? Maybe their sort of fiery breath, meaning their sort of supernatural, spiritual existence, is the one that is most in keeping with the Torah and not mine, right? So God says, no, like, come hold on to my chair, meaning the image is it protects you, but the reason it protects you is because it's sort of saying that you do have access to more than you realize. So now he says, Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, right? Master of the universe, Torah she'ata noten li ma'aktivba, right? What is written in the Torah? So God, it seems like the way that Safari reads this, and I guess we'll read it that way also, right? God says, you could read it also as a rhetorical question, but it seems like he's asking and God is responding. What's written in the Torah? God says, it says, I am the Lord your God who took you out of Egypt. And Moshe turns to the angels. He's like, well, did God take you out of Egypt? I don't think so. Right? What do you need the Torah for? What else is written in it? Lo yelach elohim echad. Right? We're sort of going through the 10 Commandments. You should have no other God. And Moshe looks at the angels. He's like, well, like, you guys are not living among people who do avodah zarah. Like, there's no chance that you're going to worship other gods. So, like, why would this even be relevant to you? What about Zachor Yom Shabbat L'Kadsho, right? You guys don't do work, so like Shabbat is not a meaningful concept for you. Obviously, the Torah is written for human beings. Great, and he keeps going through, right? Like Lo Tisah is like, you don't take, oh, this is about transactions. We're the ones who do transactions, right? You don't have parents. You don't have sort of like the urge to murder or to commit adultery or to kidnap, right? Yeah, I go dulo, lakadosh baruch hu. So immediately they concede to him. You almost want to say like, oh, the angels concede to Moshe because he's the one who's been arguing, but it's not Moshe. They concede to God who chose to give it to human beings. Shneimar Hashem Adonai ma adir shimcha. Next words are b'chol ha'aretz, right? God, our God, right? How great is your name in the whole world, the whole earth. Previously, they sort of skipped that line, b'chol ha'aretz, and said, Asher Shemahu Shel Hashemayim, right? Your glory belongs in heaven, but now they're like, oh, actually, yeah, your name belongs in the earth also. Sorry, right? So they kind of acknowledge that it's acceptable to give the Torah to Bnei Israel. Miyad kol achad ve'achad na'asalo ohev. Immediately, every angel up there becomes like Moshe's best friend. U'masalo davar, and they give him like, a special gift. Shne'emar alita l'marom shavita shavi lakachta matanot. Right, as it says in this verse in Psalms, right? You went up to heaven, you took prisoners, not prisoners, but you sort of took captives, and you took a gift, ba'adam, right, on account of man. What that means in context, great question. I don't know. But right, sort of Moshe goes up and he gets gifts, right? At first he's afraid they're going to kill him, and in the end they sort of give him a parting gift. And even Malach HaMavet, this is a little like of a Sleeping Beauty kind of motif, right? Even the bad fairy gives you davar. He gives you a present, and it's a real present. It's not like a fake present that's going to come back to bite you, we think, right? Shne'emar, right? How do we know that Malach HaMavet told Moshe some secret? Now, this is not parts of the Torah. These are sort of like secrets of sort of operating the universe, it seems, right? Because after the rebellion of Korah, right, there's a plague, and on Moshe's sort of advice, Aaron comes and he takes the Torah and he stands between the dead and the living, and he stops the plague. Ilav da'amar le'mi havayada. How could he have possibly known to do that if he hadn't received the secret directly from the Malach HaMavet? Okay, so I don't know. I mean, you can imagine many other ways that maybe you would have access to this esoteric information, but it's so interesting. The Gemara saying, like, this is not the kind of thing that you learn in the Torah. The Torah never tells you how to stop a plague with supernatural incense, right? This is like Moshe got a secret, and he used that secret, right, in the moment where, one of the moments where Bnei Israel were proving the angels right, that the people were actually not worthy of having the Torah. They're just going to screw it up. They're sinners, and you can't trust them. And he uses this to sort of give them another chance. Stop this plague, let's move on. Okay, so a few things. I said that I think this is kind of a bracket to our first passage in A. Here's why, right? As God has to kind of like maneuver or massage what's going on with Bnei Israel, right? I know they already, according to Tosfot, right? I know they already said Na'aseh v'nishma, but like they might go back on that once they see how scary the situation is. At the same time, God's also massaging stuff up in heaven, right? Like, the angels don't want to let this go. So sort of like on both ends of the bargain almost, right? God has to kind of like pull strings to make it work. And I think that sort of underscores, in some ways, the question that I wanted to start with, which is, what is so important about this moment, especially if in some ways it's incomplete? Okay. Here's sort of a different version of a similar idea where it's sort of spotlights the interaction between, this may be kind of, maybe this will bring us to some sort of meaning to take out of this. Actually, no, right? It spotlights the interaction between Moshe and Satan, not Malach HaMavet. All the commentators, many of the commentators are like, oh, this sort of like evil figure is the same, is that we can call him the angel of death, we can call him Satan, whatever. Basically, like, he's the figure who opposes the giving of the Torah to Moshe. And he comes, so Satan comes to God after, not while Moshe comes upstairs. In the first version, Moshe comes upstairs and everyone's like, what are they doing here? And God's like, oh, he's getting the Torah, and they have it out like face to face. Here, somehow, Moshe's already come down with the Torah, and Satan's like, where's the Torah? What did you do? Right, it's like Reuben when he comes back to the pit. Where's your safe? Right, he has no idea. Like, where is it? Right, and God says like, oh, I gave it to the earth. So Satan goes and looks around. Again, there's sort of a symbolic meaning here of Satan goes and looks in the earth, and the earth says it's not here. And you can read that as sort of an argument, not just like a scene of looking for something, but an argument. Like the Torah can't fit in the earth; it can't be contained in the earth, right? So he goes back to God and says, "I couldn't find it there." And God says, "I'll go check with Ben Amram," and that's where we'll pick up. So he goes to Moshe, and he says, "Hey, Moshe, Torah where's that Torah that God gave you? Presumably not with like the best intentions, meaning like I would not. This is like when the big red wolf stops you in the forest and is like, hey, where are you going? Where does your grandmother live, by the way? Like you probably don't actually want to tell the Satan or the Malchus where the Torah is because you don't know what he's going to do with it, right? Amarlo, the Chimani. He's like, what do you mean? I'm just a God. Like, why would God give me the Torah? Right? On the one hand, he's kind of like dissembling because you don't want to, Satan is not a person that you want to meet in a dark alley, and like maybe you just want to get out of this interaction as quickly as possible. But also, right, there's something substantive there, which is what God is about to pick up on. Right? So the Holy One says to Moshe, Moshe, you're lying. I did give you the Torah. What do you mean I didn't give you the Torah? Which Moshe is probably like, thanks, right? Like now what am I supposed to do? So Moshe basically says, like, the Torah is your special present, right? Your sort of like special treasure, the same words that were used in the previous version of the story from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, right? He just sort of like enjoy its company. Who am I? Should I actually be like, oh yeah, I've got the Torah, right? It's a similar sort of expression of self-doubt that Moshe had in the previous thing of like, yeah, maybe the angels are right. Maybe I can't hold the Torah, right? Right? Because you sort of were modest, you diminished your role, belittled yourself, they translated, right? So it's actually going to be called Torah Moshe. Here again, right, then we have another story in which Moshe sort of is so humble, he doesn't even talk to God, and God is like encouraging him to sort of step up and accept that he has more power than he's willing to acknowledge, more power, more capacity, I would say, not necessarily power. Okay, so in some ways, this is sort of, I don't know, the bridge, but the thing that makes this moment what it is, which is, it's true, right? There's a wholehearted acceptance. At the same time, in the background, there's all these strings that need to be pulled to make it actually work out. And there's a chance that it's not going to work out and everything is going to fall apart, right? The whole world is going to be destroyed. But the thing that makes it possible is in some ways like the openness, right? That Moshe is willing to sort of like empty himself in order to receive it, possibly. And maybe that's sort of like a model, right? What does it mean when you get the crowns, right? It's because you've made space for them. You've made space for whatever that gift is by saying Nasev Nishma and accepting sort of open-heartedly. That said, I want to sort of come around a little for a circle, which is, right, you can say all these nice things about Nasev Nishma. It keeps coming back to Chet HaEgel, which is sort of like really what Sefer Shemot is about also, right? Like, how do these two things fit together? So here, just as we started with a pun on Yom HaShishi, the sixth day, here we have another pun, Boshesh, right? So the people saw that Moshe was delayed. Actually, he's delayed for 6 hours, and here's Satan, right? He can't trap Moshe. Maybe he can trap the Jewish people. Okay. I wanted to, right, so it actually ends on kind of like a negative note, and then in the sort of like Jews versus non-Jews moment. But I think that there's something sort of reading all of these stories together, you see kind of two threads, right? One thread is this like awesome moment of open-hearted acceptance and it's so amazing and the Jews are like angels. And the other thread is like, actually the Jews are scared. They have to be forced and right, the angels don't even want to give it to them and they have to kind of transcend that in some way. And the ability to transcend that is, I think, like the nature of Matan Torah, right? It's this thing that shouldn't be possible but is. And that's why it sort of works, right? That's why it sort of is able to happen. And maybe that's why it has to happen now, because Moshe might be the only person who can make it happen. I wanted to end with just one thought. Let's see if I can get there. Okay, yeah, here's Sfas Emes, I could say. Sfas Emes on Shabbat, that is intentional. I wanted to share a concluding thought from the Sfas Emes, the first Rebbe of Gur, who, which I think will sort of bring together the two threads that I've been talking about in this sugya of Masekhet Shabbat,
88 to 89 about Matan Torah, right? One thread is this sort of wholehearted acceptance. The other thread is this moments of dread, scariness, threat, where God has to sort of finagle everything, and even the Satan is working overtime against it, and there's all sorts of good reasons why maybe Bnei Israel would not want to accept and should not be given the opportunity to have the Torah. And somehow between all of this, Matan Torah still happens anyway. So he talks about, right, what about, I didn't have a chance to make an English translation, right? He cites the Tosfot that I mentioned that talks about how, right, how could it be that God would have to force them if they already said Nasev Nishma? Answer, well, maybe they would go back on it once they realize that their life could be at stake. And he says, right, nearly nudati, it seems to me, right, in my humble opinion, that it should be explained that they were sort of concerned about, according to Tosfot, right, what the Jews were concerned about is not that they might just be threatened at this one moment, but like they're very excited about the Torah, but they're not excited about the part of the Torah that involves giving up your life for sort of the big three sins, right? Avodah zarah, gilera, shvichut damim, right? Murder, adultery, and idolatry, right? That like, they like the Torah, but they're not sure they're ready to die for it. And right, and that part of the Torah, they're not willing to accept the possibility of dying for the Torah unless they're threatened with death, unless they don't keep the Torah. And he says, right, it could be that they didn't have the capacity to sacrifice themselves for the Torah until they accepted the Torah, right? That accepting the Torah itself helps you accept the Torah, basically. Oh, I'm losing my hat. That there's something sort of, I don't know, recursive or self-referential that Na'aseh v'nishma, in some ways, right? I've seen this, I forget where I first saw this idea, but right, that Na'aseh v'nishma is not just an expression of wholehearted commitment, it's actually a description of reality, right? That like, there are certain things that you can only nishma, that you can only understand once you accept and do, right? That you can't understand everything before you do it, right? In some ways, this is, for those who learned with me about the wicked son, right? This is maybe the difference between the wicked son and the wise son in the Pesach Aggadot. Both are asking about details, but for the wicked son, understanding all the details is sort of his acceptance of the practice is contingent on his understanding of the details, and for the wise son, it's not. So I think maybe that's sort of the underlying thread in some ways that's connecting our two parts of our sugya, that there's something, right? Why does God have to force them? Because even though they want to, there's a certain level of commitment that you can't get to until you're already committed. And right, in some ways it's similar to sort of like Moshe going up there, right? Like you can't convince the angels to give it to a person until you've already brought Moshe into the circle and given him the power to sort of respond, you God meaning, right? That there's something about, it sort of has to already be there in order to reinforce itself. And like Matan Torah is located in this one moment in time, but it's also actually really interesting that it's a moment in time that doesn't work the way ordinary moments of time work, right? Where things have to happen both before and after each other. And maybe that's the thing that like that moment seeds the process of working those things out over the next, however long, until the time of Achashverosh, until the time of Mashiach, until whatever it is, all the sort of the huge time horizon that we've seen in this whole sugya. But the idea of sort of this moment where things are happening both before and after each other, and that's happening through the orchestration of God to make that work. Thanks for coming, for those who get to see this. Sorry I didn't get to say goodbye in person. Happy Women's Talmud Day.